First thing, the boy is always separated from business as usual. Transformation, initiation, getting the great vision can't happen inside of brick and mortar and asphalt. You always have to take the boy into nature. There's not a single exception to that. It's only when he's in the middle of nature that he has to respect something that's bigger than he is. Right? This is natural greatness that he can't control, that he's in awe of. And he has to be left there normally, like we see in the vision quest of the Native Americans. He has to be left there long enough and quiet long enough. Almost always solitude and silence is of the essence. So he can observe the patterns of nature itself, of the animals, and start sinking back in to his solidarity with the universe. So initiation, first of all, is not a psychological paradigm at all. It's not about therapy. It's not about solving your problems with your father or your mother or how you were hurt. In fact, it just sort of leaps over those. Initiation is not a psychology, it's a cosmology. And that's why it transforms at such a deep level. It aligns the young man as a son of the universe, that he knows he belongs. Now, as a Christian, I'm absolutely convinced this is the exact meaning of Jesus' 40 days in the desert. But we didn't get it because we didn't know anything about initiation. And what he comes out with, if you remember, is a very, very simple message. I'm a beloved and I'm a son. That's all. That's enough. That's enough to change everything. And you can't just know that up here, of course. You have to know it down here in your belly and in your body and all the way through, that you're a beloved and you're a son. You're connected, and you're connected in a fortuitous, wonderful way, not a dangerous way, not a morbid way. And what we've done, it seems to me, I hope I'm not being too negative, but I got it from a Jewish friend recently who was talking to one of my nephews. And she said that, I don't mean to be disrespectful to you. She knew I was a Catholic priest. And she said, but as an outsider to Christianity, I try to understand it, and I try to observe it. And she says, what it seems to me is you Christians are always feeling guilty. And she says, I just don't get it. Help me understand. And I almost had to hear it from someone outside to recognize how true that is. That much of it is all sin-based, guilt-based, and shame people, make them feel afraid of God, make them feel they're going to get punished for their sins. And for some strange reason, we thought that was going to motivate people to love God. Initiation comes at it so much more positively. It's not moralistic at all. It totally does a sort of preemptive strike in terms of diving you into the beauty of the universe that you are a part of. And it knows that it can't teach you that merely in verbal form or by lectures like I'm doing now. This is clearly an inferior way of teaching, the lecture method. You have to send people so they experience it. And I think that's the only way men understand and feel respected by God. When God becomes their teacher and they know for themselves, and then you come along with your words and you simply, like a midwife, you pull out the child that has already been born within them. That teaching works. So initiation gave the primacy to nature, to solitude and silence, and all the discipline that went with that. And also a kind of expectation of something's going to happen. Creating the holy desire, creating the expectation. Something good's going to happen. And you know, for those of you who've been, it always does. I mean, I'm still amazed myself how it always does. But what I have to do the first 3 days, if you remember, is create what we call liminal space. Now, limina is a Latin word that means threshold. It's when you've left one room and you haven't entered the new room yet. Okay, you're in between spaces. And all transformation takes place in liminal space. All initiation takes place in liminal space. Liminal space is when all the extraneous things are taken away. And like was said in City Slickers, which was paradoxically filmed at Ghost Ranch, only one thing matters. Right? Now, whenever you've been in a situation, I'll bet you all have been, where only one thing matters, that's when new things happen. Maybe it was when you first found the death of a person that you were in love with, first discovered or heard of the death. For the next few days, you can think of nothing but that, everything. When it's one of your parents or your wife or a child, it goes on for years. It reframes the universe. That's liminal space. America was in liminal space for a couple months after September 11th. That's why there's so many stories. Because we saw everything. You got tired of hearing, maybe we still do, September 11th. Because only one frame explained anything and everything. I'll bet it happened to you as men the first time you fell in love as a teenage boy. That first great infatuation where all you can think of is this girl. Everything is seen in that light, and you'll see young boys just grow immensely during that period. Now, Mircea Eliade, who's done a lot of the greatest work on initiation, he says modern and postmodern people, which is what we are, we have very limited access to liminal space. We live almost 99% of our lives, now even more so because of the media, in profane space. Profane space is when there's no one thing that matters. There's just everything grabbing your attention every 3 minutes. And you live with a flypaper mind, just jumping around, solving this problem, solving that problem, fixing that, explaining that, controlling that. Nothing new will happen in that framework. So what you have to do is you have to pull the man out of business as usual, where he's living with his flypaper mind, or a flea jumping around, whatever image you want. You have to lead him away from that into a safe place where you say, in effect, only one thing matters the next few days. You have to take away his roles, his self-importance, so he can't be kissing up to those or protecting those or promoting those. In classic initiation, the boys all wore the same clothes, the same boring clothes, so you couldn't advertise your specialness or your difference. I'm just a man. And we're all naked underneath these clothes. There, it seems, was the readying so that the boy could receive the message. But inside of that was not just created the expectation of greatness or God, but inside of that, true eldering could happen. In fact, the boy was left alone and aimless, so he'd start longing for guidance. So he'd start longing for someone tell me what this means. Someone tell me what my life means. And after he'd waited long enough, we have to limit it to just a few days, but classic initiation went on weeks and months. When beginner's mind was created and the boy was teachable, then, when the student is ready, the teacher will arrive. Then authority could be represented. And there's no apologizing for wisdom inside of initiation. There's those who have been given the call or have the right to be teachers and to say to the men, here's what's real, here's what isn't real. And I send you out to believe it for yourself. So there's usually core central teachings. They're mostly about spirituality and sexuality, which is somehow the embodied world and the interior world, which is what the male is always trying to put together. He isn't that at home in the interior world, so he has to almost be forced there. And as I said before, usually the only thing strong enough to force him is pain. When it hurts so much, then he has to make sense out of it. And so you leave the boy So he can't keep running from his pain. So he can't keep running from his loneliness and his boredom and his silliness or his superficiality. And then can discover his inherent dignity. So you have to normally lead him. And these are the tests and ordeals that you've heard about, although we are very tame about it. But somehow you lead him outside of his comfort zone, to the edge of his usual resources that he relies upon. So he has to start calling upon some different resources. That's the key, right? Now, if you keep pandering to the ego, if you keep feeding him with drugs, sex, and rock and roll and noise and chatter and his usual roles and self-importance, nothing new is going to happen. So what you do in initiation, you take all that away. And I'm happy to say no one ever leaves. But you can see some guys want to. Because for a while, they're in naked nothingness. I don't know who I am here. I don't know how to define my superiority that I usually do, or my role. And that's exactly what has to happen. Then it's easy. Then God can so easily take over, and it always happens.